if you can see the journals very well, but you can see obviously where it took some hits from the rod.
All right, what is going on, guys? It is Daelen from MAPerformance. Last time we had a Civic video out, we were talking about kind of what's the most you can make with your factory turbocharger and the bolt-on performance parts that are easy to install, kind of our stage 2 packages and other manufacturers kind of right in that same component lineup. Today, what we're gonna talk about is our road to 500+ horsepower and what didn't go so well. What are the parts that we broke? What are the parts that failed on us, outright disintegrated into multiple pieces, and kind of everything in between. One of the more recent videos that we've done is kind of walking you through what we got going on in our R&D process, kind of the parts we're developing right now. And those are all coming from that supporting side of stuff of, if you do put a bigger turbocharger on the vehicle, what do you need to make that power? So we have a video that kind of explains what we're working on from fuel system to turbo kit and kind of everything in between right now. We'll link that video right up here. That's gonna be a little more of an update on the car and what we're doing with it these days. But today what we're gonna talk about is kind of the roadmap of when we brought the car to the track the first time and kind of our progression of racing the car, what we found went wrong.
Sounds like a fourth gear failure. Interesting how it broke second and then it broke fourth. Like, it seems like there's no definitive weak point.
One of the first things that we did when we put this car on the dyno and turned up the boost was immediately disintegrated the factory clutch. With that, we went over to a Clutchmasters clutch that was at the time, I think, an FX400, one of their first FX400s out, and continued to turn up the boost. I think we lost that one right around 400 horsepower, and then went to their FX725, and that's gonna be the twin disc that's currently in the vehicle right now. So a number one component that as soon as you modify these cars, I know we've talked about in other videos, but kind of a guarantee, clutch is gonna go out. And as you kind of look at different power levels, there's a multitude of options out there for a clutch. Now, we did also break an axle. That I don't know if I'd put that on the car itself. That was just us learning how to launch the car, learning how to slip the clutch and what we wanted to do with it. But if you don't know what you're doing or you do have a little bit too much power, it is possible on a sticky surface to snap an axle. Now, I don't think I'd recommend going out there and replace an axle tomorrow if you got more than 500 horsepower or even more than 400 horsepower, but it's something to be aware of, that if you're gonna drag race the car, you wanna learn how to slip the clutch, how to launch the car in a way that isn't going to immediately just hook and snap apart in either the axle or the transmission itself. That brings me to kind of the biggest weak point that we've seen with making power with these cars is going to be the transmission, the gear set specifically inside of the transmission. We have gone through more transmissions than we've gone through almost any other component in our drag race car. We've sheared second gear, we've sheared fourth gear, and when I say shear, we're actually ripping the teeth off of the actual gear itself. Usually on power, loaded up, so say we shift into fourth on the drag strip, we're just seeing it just shear the teeth right off that gear. We've tried doing some coatings on the gears, we've tried doing some polishing on the gears. Unfortunately, we just haven't seen luck with any of that. And what we did is we actually worked with a company called Sands, and they developed a gear set for our transmission that's currently in there right now that we've been testing and working with. There are a few other manufacturers that make some gear sets out there. M Factory is one of them, PPG is another one of them. As long as you go with kind of a reputable gear set manufacturer, you're going to have good luck. The downside to this is that's a pretty expensive thing to have to put into the car. So if you are looking to make that 500 horsepower mark or looking to drag race the car, this is something to kind of keep in mind as you're looking to make more and more power. There's some options to replace single gears or complete sets. Kind of the best bet is to speak with one of our sales reps or anybody that you want to talk to about kind of questions on that. And on the transmission side of stuff, you're kind of it's the size. It's all really small stuff. It's all really small gears. So because of the sheer size of everything, you're just putting a lot of power through them. And one of the ways that we went after combating that was trying to keep the torque kind of lower on the bottom side of the dyno graph. The power curve, we try to keep the torque low on the left side of the curve and ramp that boost and torque in a lot higher. Like when shifting, you wouldn't drop into super high torque and immediately shear stuff off. It would kind of ramp into the torque. These ECUs are very intelligent. As long as you have someone intelligent behind the keyboard, you're able to control where it brings on the power. So if you're bringing on the power super early, that's why we're seeing a lot of engines that bend rods or kind of just throw something out the side of the block, is there's a lot of power down low, and they just don't like that. They're not designed to take that much cylinder pressure down low. So another thing that we didn't outright see fail, but we saw was actually hindering us on making power, and I'm sure if we pushed it a lot farther, we would have seen a failure, was valve springs. So we actually ran factory camshafts, factory valves, but with an upgraded valve spring. So early on, we had some custom stuff in our original pre-production head, and that was just a combination of springs, shims, kind of just to make an off-the-shelf setup work. What we were seeing is valve float, and we were seeing kind of like stress fracturing on the valves from floating. So just a lot of like fretting marks on the bottom of them. Basically, they're just super soft. So we saw in higher RPM, higher boost applications, it just couldn't hold boost. It was literally just not letting that valve close all the way. So we're just seeing it float open and kind of just keep that spring compressed. So we went to a stiffer spring, and I'm sure that if we revved the engine as high as we revved it, with as much boost as we were putting into that car, I mean, sometimes upwards of high 40s as far as boost pressure. We started getting a little bit, I'll say, greedy. As we were racing the car, we found that there was kind of a sweet spot of track location that we wanted to shift at. So we had to make sure we got to that sweet spot before we shifted. And what that required us to do is actually play with the rev limiter a little bit more. So we revved our L15 over 10,000 RPMs numerous times. As we've done that, we ended up having an oil pump gear that kind of just disintegrated on us. So most of these factory gears are going to be a sintered metal. So it's just powdered metal that's pressed together. It's a fairly weak point in a lot of modern engines. So we're going to see that on like Ford Coyote motors, on a lot of the VQs. We're going to see oil pumps that just kind of will get hairline cracks and kind of just disintegrate. We did have that issue on the L15. Now, is that to say that every single person out there is going to have one of these fail if they go over the rev limiter a little bit more than once? Probably not, but it is definitely possible, and the more abuse you put through these cars, the more you're going to see the oil pumps kind of take that abuse. We worked with a company called Boundary. They actually do gears for a bunch of other engines, high quality products. They're making an L15 gear now that you can kind of get through any number of their Boundary dealers. Now, we usually stock those here. We're happy to help you out with them, but that's going to be an upgrade that we saw is a good bang for your buck when building an engine for sure. There's no reason not to put one in if you're building a motor. Kind of the final thing that came into play for us, and it's hard for me to even put it at a failure point or make it a thing that says it's going to explode, but we did finally lose our factory short block. So after, I'd have to go back and sit down and look at the numbers, but I think we had 500 plus passes on this car on a factory bottom end. And we're talking factory pistons, factory rods, factory crank, factory bearings, factory oil pan, factory everything on the bottom side of it. And I would say 80% of those passes were over 500 horsepower. To even say that that engine failed is like almost kind of mean to it because of how much abuse we put it through, how much power it made for such a long time. But we did finally, with about 45, 46 PSI boost, and I can't remember the exact number of nitrous on it, but we had multiple 100 horsepower shot worth of nitrous being put into that motor. We did finally have a rod break. So it was hard to, because of the carnage we had from it, really decide whether it was a rod or a rod bolt or a wrist pin or what exactly failed first. But as you get up into those higher power numbers, bigger turbos, more boost, that factory engine is going to become tired. Now, would I recommend you go out there on your street car, make 500 horsepower and try to drive it for a year? No, probably not. You got to be prepared for a total loss at that point. That motor is going to blow up at some point. The very fact that it made it through as much abuse as we put it through, we ran that motor, we were prepared to swap that motor at the racetrack, and every single time it just kept going. When we finally lost it on the dyno, what we did is we had a motor originally that we had built about a year prior to even needing to put it in that had a custom I-beam rod, custom pistons. We worked with Honda for the OEM bearings, OEM crank, and we did swap that short block into the car, and that one along with a few other test blocks have been kind of what the car's been running on the last couple of years. But as we progress into more nitrous, more boost, we just wanted that safety factor of a built bottom end. So you're gonna look at a forged piston, a forged rod, performance-oriented assembly. Like I said, you can make the power, but it's kind of a ticking time bomb. You don't know when it's gonna go. and for the sure fact that you don't want to oil down a racetrack, you don't want to blow something up driving to work, like it's just not really worth that risk for most average consumers. For us, it was a risk we wanted to take because we wanted to find the failure points and we wanted to work through them ourselves to bring the best products to the market to help you guys buy the stuff you need and not just sell stuff you don't really need. So we actually machine and assemble all of our own engines in-house. That allows us a lot of creative freedom that a lot of people don't have. So my technician can go over to my engine team and say, hey, we're seeing this issue, and we can fix that internally very quickly, which has allowed us to have a very, 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 very high confidence in our engine program that we bring to the table. So we actually currently shelf stock L15s. So we have a stage 1 block that I know we're keeping in stock right now. And at the time of filming, I don't know if we currently have any stage 1 plus or stage 2s in stock, but I know as time goes on, we're gonna be stocking those. So we're looking at either an H-beam or an I-beam rod, a CSS block, different piston options. But we do stock engines here. You can order them up, either call our sales team or right on our website. If you have any questions, obviously the sales team is gonna be best. They can kind of guide you through what you might want or need for your specific setup. But yeah, so all of this R&D leads us to kind of have, I'll say quick on our feet ability to make changes and work through problems and develop an engine program that I think is gonna be difficult to beat from a lot of other people, mainly because we can control everything in-house. If you guys wanna see any more content around those engines or what would be interesting to kind of hear about those, if you want a little more breakdown on those specifics. I know we've done some videos showing the stage 1 long blocks in the past and short blocks in the past, but if you guys wanna see anything else, as always, let us know. And once again, thank you. Because of you guys, we're able to do this content, we're able to build these cars, we're able to have this fun and create compelling components for you guys to modify your car. If you want to see more content like this, obviously like, subscribe, all the other stuff that you guys do on YouTube, because that helps us, that helps the channel, that helps us bring more stuff and know what you like and what you don't like. If you guys have any questions at all that I'm not answering here, reach out to our sales staff, shoot us an email, shoot us a phone call. We're always here for you guys and really appreciate it. Thank you.